Back, we continue our focus on the situation in the Democratic Republic of Congo. This as the Central African country enters the home stretch for the December 23rd elections. And tonight we joined in studio by a member of a prominent DRC youth and social movement, LUCHA, Sylvain Saluseke. He's been part of the civil society groups who have been lobbying for support in South Africa this week to help resolve problems at home. Sylvain, thank you so much for joining us and welcome.
Thank you very much.
First of all, talk us through what is it that you really want the broader community to help with the situation in the DRC?
2 years ago, we were supposed to have elections in the DRC already. And 2 years later, we're still very uncertain, even though we have the date, even though we know that President Kabila has somehow pronounced that he's not running. But we still feel that there are many other issues that have been addressed yet for us to actually move in that what we call a stretch run to have elections that are due on the 23rd of December. So we still have situations whereby, from a civil society point of view, a couple of items. So LUCHA, which is my movement, with other prominent youth movement in the DRC, we got together, we launched a platform, which is electiondrccongo.com, to have almost a benchmark for us to have a credible and peaceful elections. And when you go there, you will see that actually out of 10 easy point, the government has only been ready for 2, which means out of 10, we only have 2. With one is President Kabila announcing that he's not running, 2 giving us a date. However, when you, last week, or rather 2 weeks ago, politicians were in South Africa, of them Moise Katumbi, who hasn't been allowed to go back. If he is the prominent one, there are many other Congolese, like myself, who can't go back, which were actually part of the agreement to allow for a free and fair elections. And all these things haven't happened yet. So we feel that international community, South Africa in particular, need to still maintain and remain focused on the DRC so we can have elections, free and fair elections on December 20th.
And having said that, do you think South Africa can contribute meaningfully in the restoration of peace in the DRC and, of course, holding free and fair elections?
We shouldn't forget that as we speak, South Africa has troops in the DRC. And then I'll take you back in the Sun City Accord. Under President Thabo Mbeki, South Africa played a very important role in brokering a peace deal when there were many fighting groups in the country. So not only South Africa has a vested interest, but I think as a powerhouse within the region, they have a key role to play. And that's the reason why actually we all got in South Africa. 2 days ago, we had an event at Civicus where we had to speak of why South Africa has to remain engaged to facilitate this process going through.
You know, SADC as a regional body hasn't really spoken out meaningfully and quite realistically about the situation in the DRC. So what gives you the confidence that things will change now?
You have to remember that the reason why President Kabila had to name a successor, and the reason why he ended up actually, the only place where he said his goodbye was at the SADC meeting. These two would have never happened if it wasn't for international pressure. Of course, we are not discounting the pressure we put back home. Not longer than yesterday and today, some of our members are actually demonstrating, asking for the same thing. And since 2 or 3 years ago, we've been pushing for that internally. We are not discounting the fact that South Africa, with what President Mbeki might have called a quiet diplomacy, and we can see it at play when President Kabila can leave the DRC, get into Namibia, for instance, and go and say his goodbye there. You know, you can see, and we have confidence that actually South Africa and the SADC as a region, they really have a bigger role to play, and that has been shown itself.
Earlier this week, the opposition movement based here in South Africa met South Africa's the ruling party, the African National Congress, to seek for intervention of South Africa in the DRC. You are also part of that grouping, isn't it? But you say that you didn't get involved in the politics. So but the end result that you're actually looking for is pretty much the same. What do you mean that you don't want to get involved in the political aspect of the negotiations?
Well, the big separation is as follows. You have political parties that are running to get into power. And us as social movement, we are focusing and actually asking for the basic things, which are good governance, which are power, which is electricity, which is good road, education and health. And some of these issues are not political. Everybody within their society, they want them. And I think this is how our key push are different. And when this group met with the ANC, which, by the way, is a very welcoming move, that the ANC can actually reach out to the oppositions and meet with them and discuss about the DRC. It's a very welcoming move. However, we were not part of those discussions, even though it happens that we are all together in Joburg trying to lobby the DRC, I mean the South African government, lobbying the ANC so they can actually remain engaged and push for free and fair elections in the DRC.
Okay. Yeah. So President Kabila says the reason the elections were not held in 2016 was because the country was not financially and technically ready to hold elections. So what has changed?
This is why South Africa and all the different powers need to remain engaged. I mentioned earlier about the platform that we've launched. We have key points that 2 years ago should have met, and today is only 2 of them have been met. We're still very, very hopeful that we'll have elections this year still. However, without any pressure, we might not have elections. So the question is, what has changed? For us, we feel most probably it's the willingness from the Congolese that it keeps mounting and saying, we want free and fair elections. We don't want to go back. What we tend to avoid is that come December 23rd, we just acknowledge that, yes, once more again, there must be delays. We're hoping that before we get there, politicians, powerhouses within the region can exert enough pressure so that we can move and see some of these points, as you can see on our website, they are very within reach. Things such as allowing politicians to go back. I mean, how can you run elections where you are barring other oppositions to actually compete in the same process? How can you have elections when you don't want? President Kabila mentioned about funding. You said the UN, for instance, which is the biggest mission in the Congo, they offered support, but the government says, well, we don't want your support. We will manage it on our own. The DRC is a big country. We've got no infrastructure. Running just elections itself, it's a huge task. When we hear the government rhetorics of saying they'll be able to do it by themselves, even though 2 years ago they said they don't have money, it leaves us wondering. And that's why we feel and call upon SADC, South Africa, political parties within the region to get more power and remain engaged so we can have a free and fair elections. The other side is the worst part, which we don't want, which is going back into war, instability. If you look into the SADC as a region, one of the reasons why it was created was to foster and the social fabric within this space. But when now you have in a region where it's instability, people move from one area. In Kasai, a couple of months back, people moved into Angola, and the results, instability in the area. Up in the Beni, where there are more killings almost every day, people going into Uganda, more instability. So we don't want to see that happening just because someone is in power and refuses to run elections just because we feel like they want to hang on for no obvious reasons.
Yeah. I want to engage you a little bit more about the opposition in the DRC. I mean, with the exclusion of Jean-Pierre Bemba and Moise Katumbi, does the opposition carry enough weight to challenge Joseph Kabila's successor in the person of Emmanuel Shadari? Can they pull it off?
This question is on 2 sides. One is that we want to emphasize on the process. If you give the Congolese people the process, they will choose themselves who they want to govern them. However, when you look into the political space, where we've got a Seni, which is our electoral body, is completely following what the government asked them to do by eliminating people like Jean-Pierre Bemba and Katumbi. When we have the highest court in the land, we're supposed to actually be in the middle, has been filled up with own president, people from his own party as well as his own office. We feel that there's a lot more leaning onto for the government than being free and fair. So this might be a big challenge for the oppositions. We hope that they can get together and have probably one candidate, which will just tilt a bit the power, which will put more pressure on the government so we can have good free and fair elections. It's more of the process we want. If we can have a free and fair process, the Congolese people will choose themselves, even if the opposition doesn't pick up one candidate. But in the end, people will choose whoever they feel like.
But then do you think it will be free and fair if 2 candidates who top the popularity stakes have been excluded? You
see, you're talking about the 2 being excluded. I can quickly read for you here one of the things that should have been part of it. It's the independence and impartiality of the electoral justice system, freedom for all citizens to demonstrate peacefully, reopening of all private media and fair access to public media, release of political prisoners. And since these are some of the things that, because they haven't been done, we know that this process is already flawed in going into it anyway. From a civil society point of view, we feel that this is not the right space for us to have just to get into elections because it's a ticking box. it has to be part of a strong process to have a very stable DRC. Last, I think when I was here at SABC, I mentioned about that we from a civil society, we feel we should probably allow a transition period so we can have a free and fair process. However, if we are still being asked to go through this process, certain key things need to be, benchmark need to be met, and without that, we are going into a process which is going to end up leading into chaos and more instability. So the question of giving the opposition chances of winning, it's more, it's kind of an unfair question, because we are going into an already rigged process that we all know from the word go.
As a person or as an organization advocating for such issues from the sidelines,
correct,
you're one of those who've been exiled in South
correct.
Africa. How much of an impact would your advocacy or your activism contribute towards bringing about the needed change in the DRC? I
have to thank you for hosting us here. And sometimes you might not realize how much this means into just spreading the word out there. And it takes such occasions. It takes meeting with the civil society in South Africa. It takes meeting with the DIRCO. It takes meeting with different other NGOs. It takes meeting with the ANC like this, the politicians have done, whichever actually now make it sure that we are moving in that directions. And this, we are not discounting the fact that the real fight is happening on the ground. Not longer than yesterday, we had some marches, and today across the country, just to ask that we don't want this electoral process. And just a point that I was almost forgetting about how flawed this process is, we're being imposed to use a machine to use as a process, which one is illegal, it's not in the law, and then two, it has shown its own shortcomings, not from electricity not being available in other places in the DRC, from people not being able to use these tactical machines, and it's showing that actually it can be hacked and being changed at any will. So we really call upon the Congolese people, and we feel that they are the ones actually who are actually doing the most of the work within the ground, in the country, and on an everyday life. All right, Sylvain, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for hosting us. That is Sylvain Saluseke, a member of a social movement, LUCHA, who've been advocating for South Africa's intervention in the DRC. This is the Global SABC.